Hey, it's Trevor with Better Youth Ministry, and a couple of videos ago I shared with you some different tips on how to make the most out of your Zoom small group experience, but those tips were kind of at that macro higher level. Things like, start off your group time with fun, things like show up early. That way when students get there into that meeting space, they don't think that they're in the wrong place and you're there to greet them. Those are kind of macro level tips. In this video, I want to drill down a little bit and talk about some of those micro level technical details that I've kind of stumbled upon or figured out as I've been working with the technology that I think will help you out, and they're helping me out to have a much better Zoom small group experience. So 6 tips, here we go. Tip number 1 is to mute loud participants. So I am a 6th grade small group leader at my church, and that means that with 6th grade guys, every now and again, somebody will think it's hilarious just to make some awkward noises, or sometimes they're just being really disruptive. And at that point in time, the mute button is your friend. So just go ahead and click that mute button, and that participant, whoever's being awkward or disruptive, they'll be silenced for a little bit. They'll keep doing what they're doing, but pretty soon they'll realize that nobody's listening, nobody's reacting, and they'll figure it out and kind of cut it out. So use the mute button, mute loud participants. Tip number 2 is to restrict sharing options. So I kind of learned this the hard way. I think I learned all these the hard way. But the participants have the ability to share their screen unless you disable that ability. And so at one point, my screen was taken over by one of the 6th grade guys, and he's doodling all over it and typing in different things. And that's when I realized, oh no, I did not restrict the sharing option. So I jumped in and did that. If you just go ahead and do that at the top end, at the front end of your group, that will make sure that you have a much better experience so that your screen is the only one that is being shared. Tip number 3 is to switch your view. Now, this was probably a complete rookie mistake, but for the first week that I was using Zoom, the person in the center of the screen was the person who was talking, and then everybody else in the group was kind of side by side in their little boxes across the top of the screen. And this week I figured out that there's a grid view, and so if you click over, it's at the top right of your screen. It's 9 little boxes. You just click the grid view. That will enhance your experience so much because you'll actually be able to see all the different people who are there in your meeting. So switch your view. Tip number 4 is to enable changed names. And this was just kind of a bit of fun for us in my group. Every few minutes or so, kids would change their names, and it was just kind of funny. As long as they don't do anything, that would be, dirty or whatever, just maybe, give them a heads up about that ahead of time. But I know that enabling changed names kind of kept them interested and kept them going and gave everybody a good laugh as different names kind of popped up, and it was just a neat thing. So I would do that just for the sake of, creating a more enjoyable experience in the group. Tip number 5 is to ensure screen share sound. So at one point in our small group meeting, I clicked to share my screen because it was time to share the teaching video that the student pastor had put together, and then we were going to come back at the end of that and have our small group kind of discussion questions and things like that. So I shared my screen, rolled the video, and about a minute later, one of the other small group leaders in the group texted me and said, "Hey, we can't hear the sound." And so I had to kind of pull back and scramble real quick and figure out what the problem was. And when you're sharing your screen, there's a little checkbox at the bottom left that will enable you to share the sound from your computer. I didn't have that box checked, and so when I was rolling that video, nobody could hear it. And so when I went back to do it again, check the box, play the video, and everybody could hear. So just remember to be sure to ensure the screen share sound. And then tip number 6 is prevent Zoom bombers. So this has not actually happened to me, but I've been reading about it in all kinds of different places where people who don't exactly have the best of intentions are showing up into the Zoom meeting room and posting things that are crude or rude or lewd. And so you don't want to be having any of that happen if you can help it. I know that me, as the dad of a 6th grade guy, that weighs heavy on me, and I don't want him to be exposed to different things in the Zoom group that he doesn't need to be. So the way that you're going to combat this is simply create a waiting room before participants can enter the Zoom group time. You can do that, as well as you can create a password that participants need to have access to before they can get in. And so that will help you prevent Zoom bombers. So there you go, 6 quick tips. Number 1, mute loud participants. Number 2, restrict sharing options. Number 3, switch your view. Number 4, enable changed names. Number 5, ensure screen share sound. Number 6, prevent Zoom bombers. Now I will say that there was one quick win that came out of our time on the Zoom group, and that is that there was a guy, a young man in our group who had moved with his family over to Nepal. And it was tough to see him go, but this past week in the Zoom small group time, he was able to actually log in and join the guys. They were glad to see him. He was glad to see him. So that's just one win that's coming out of some of this new technology that we're all having to learn and use on the fly very quickly. So do me a favor, if you don't mind, I'd love for you to share maybe your best tip that you've learned so far in the comments below, and I'll see you on the next video.